Good morning. It's good to be a part of this one heart. I've missed being with you. It was good to get away, and it's really great to come back to you as well. So thank you for permitting me to be here and to not be here. It works for me at this point in my life, so thank you. So we're going to start a little mini-series today, and it's based upon a book that, it's loosely based upon the book. I always throw that little caveat in there because I may go down some bunny trail, and you said it was supposed to be based on the book, and you're not talking about, well, I have to give myself some license to roam away. But it inspired me to do a message on this because I think with everything that's going on in the world, and generally, how do we contextualize what we feel in the larger spiritual milieu in which we live and move and have our being in a way that can give us some sense that there is a presence and a power that is guiding us and pulling us into a more enlightened place where we can look towards a better future as an extrinsic result of our awakening. So, I don't know if that helps you, but it helps me to think that there's something bigger and better that's at play in the midst of all these difficulties that trouble the human scene. So anyway, that's sort of my little introduction, but we're going to be talking essentially about the evolution of consciousness. It's a long, long, long story that we've been evolving, depending on whether you accept the story of time and space that goes with this. But that's where we're going to begin. We're going to start with the Big Bang. I'm actually going to read from the book. I have my Kindle version here. So here we go. Did I tell you the name of the book? That would be nice, wouldn't it? Leave you hanging there, And next week, come back and I'll tell you the name of the book. A little carrot there to bring you back. No, it's actually a book by Robert Brummett. And he is I think he's still a professor at the Unity School, ministerial school that I attended many years ago. And he was my favorite instructor. Very intelligent, erudite, heart-based person. And he's written a number of books. And this one is called Birthing a Greater Reality. Birthing a Greater Reality, a guide for conscious evolution. Does that sound good? Anyone up for some conscious evolution? Yeah, we're all evolving, but sometimes doesn't it feel like we're devolving? Like we're going, wait a minute, I think I'm going backwards here. And of course, it isn't all one linear direction forward. That's just, we know that about whether it's weight loss or getting in shape or, learning a language or anything. There's going to be times when we feel like we're making progress, and at times we feel like we're stuck or we're maybe even devolving a little bit. And that's okay, because the general trajectory is moving us forward. And if we are willing and we keep showing up with our intention and our willingness, we find that we keep moving forward. And that's part of what this series is going to be about, is really checking in to see if we're willing to get on board with what God or Spirit or truth is wanting to do through us as expressions of the One. So this is our part to play in this evolution. So here we go. It's the story of you, according to the evolutionary story. The Big Bang occurred nearly 14 billion years ago, and about 10 billion years ago, and about 10 billion years ago, I need someone to read for me. Let's start over, shall we? The story of you. The Big Bang occurred nearly 14 billion years ago. And about 10 billion years after this Big Bang, you, the living soul of humanity, were born into physical form. You probably don't remember that. No. You were born on a small planet circling a fairly average star located somewhere near the edge of a spiral galaxy. There were more than 100 billion such stars in this galaxy, and over 100 billion such galaxies in the universe at that time. This planet, now named Earth, formed more than 4 billion years ago, but it was less than 1 billion years old upon your arrival. Your beginnings were indeed humble. A few protein molecules decided to get together and to make something of themselves, and voila, you were born. For more than 2 billion years, you were just a single-celled creature. Talk about underachieving, huh? I mean, that's 2 billion years, single cell. But then you discovered sex, and things really took off. I knew you're all awake now, right? Just 1 billion years later, you developed a backbone, and only 300 million years after that, you were feeding milk to your babies. About 2 million years ago, you found yourself in your present form, a hairless primate that learned to walk upright. You learned to use tools and eventually speech, and about 200,000 years ago, you became Homo sapiens, wise man. Then in the blink of a cosmic eye, you were walking on the moon. You have learned language and music and science and poetry and many wonderful things, but more important, you are beginning to discover what? Yourself. Yeah. About 100,000 years ago, you became Homo sapiens, two sapiens. Not just a wise man, but wise man. You began to understand that you understand. You became aware that you were aware. You began to discover your own wisdom and power and beauty. And now you are starting to discover what you really are. You're beginning to awaken from the dream. Awakening from the dream, yes. And of course, this morning I was contemplating this whole notion of this idea that many of us feel this dissatisfaction. Maybe we've felt it our whole life, a sort of a nagging discontent. And we continue to feel that we want more in life. We want more happiness. We want peace. We want to feel more content in our skin. We want to know that we're moving in the direction of something better, more happiness is keeps coming up. And what I think is missing in our understanding, and this is where spirituality, I think, might be a little bit lacking in evolution, the teaching of spirituality, is that we have failed to realize that feeling that we have of wanting more happiness and more love and more light is not something that the sense of being separate, the separate self that we take ourselves to be, is really something that it can do. The only thing that can bring us back to who and what we truly are is what we truly are. In other words, it is the calling of spirit calling us back to our original nature, to the truth of our being that is at the heart of this yearning that we have for more life and more happiness and more joy. Does that make sense? Does that resonate? And I'll open this up in a little while, that we want to have a little conversation about this, because I think this is a really important recognition, at least it is for me, and I hope that you might have a similar aha from this, is that so often we think that this person that I think I am, I take myself to be this body, this mind, this story of Larry, this character, is going to actually wake up to the truth of my being. And that's just not possible, because the sense of a separate being apart from the whole of life does not in truth exist. So how can that which is not real wake up to what is real. The premise is false from the start. And so what we're really here for is to allow what already is true, in other words, how we were created in the image and the likeness of God, the spiritual truth of us, to have its way through, we can call it consciousness or awareness or awakeness or God's infinite being at the point of view, to allow that to have its way through us is to get in league or become candidates for the kind of awakening process that can actually take place, rather than trying to sort of morph this false self into a spiritual being, which is oftentimes what we do if we're stuck in a self-improvement notion, like, I need to make myself better, I need to get more spiritual, I need to read more scripture, I need to pray more, I need to meditate more, as if this character somehow is going to suddenly become, like Jesus. That's not the way it works, because that, what we take ourselves to be, is a false representation of who and what we truly are. And this comes as shocking news to a lot of us, because we thought that we, could become spiritual, as a separate character. But the truth is, we have to go back sort of to our original nature. And the good news is that original nature is pulling us back all the time. And that's the tension that you and I feel when we don't feel as happy as we would like to feel, or as peaceful as we would think is possible for us to feel. It's not the me that I think I am that can go in that direction. It's about the me that I think I am letting go of its notion of itself as a real character, so that the spirit that is us, that is truly us, can emerge and can begin to be made known through our consciousness and through our awareness. So this is a whole different paradigm of what spiritual process is all about. And it was, sort of caught me just a number of years ago, how important it is for me not to overdo this self-improvement thing. Does anyone know this one? Like there's Larry, there's the Larry Project, and then there's the Tim Project and the Tia Project. I mean, all these little projects are like we're trying to make ourselves better. And it's like, the truth of us will just find that so amusing, because we're already, all that we need and all that we seek for is already been imbued in our spiritual DNA. And it's just really waiting to be recognized, realized, and expressed. And that is the journey of awakening that I'm interested in fostering in myself, and to make this journey accessible for those who have ears to hear. I believe that's all that Jesus and every enlightened master was saying, is that, it's a journey without distance, as A Course in Miracles says, to a home you've really never left, except in your mind. And when we live in our mind, we can imagine that we are separate from love and from life and from God and from truth and from peace. And for everything that we think that we truly, really want, we've imagined ourselves apart from it. And so we are living in this dream of separation, as opposed to living in the truth of our connection, our infinite connection with life and peace and wholeness. So I think I may have shared this with you before. It's a description by Rupert Spira, who was a Vedanta teacher of the non-dual spirituality, and he says it's like the truth of us is like a rubber ball. So a rubber ball, obviously it's flexible, so it can be compressed, and in its relaxed state, it's expanded. And that would be the natural state of you and I. When we are completely identified as a spiritual being, we would be fully expanded. Actually, there would be no limit on our expanse. So you kind of have to, the metaphor isn't perfect, but just imagine that if there was no limits on your sense of yourself, there would be no limit on the expansive sense of your being. So that's your natural state. But the separate self, or the notion that we're separate from life and from God and from truth, has resulted in this contraction. So it's squeezed this rubber ball, and what we feel is the result of that contraction. That feeling that there's more to life, that there's more love, there's more peace than we're experiencing, is not a result of what's happening in our life, which is the notion the separate self is really fond of, is that if she would, if he would, if this would. That's not the source of our discomfort. The source of our discomfort is that this naturalness, this natural love and peace and everything that we already are made has just, it has just been contracted, and that's why we don't feel it. And so what's calling us is not the separate self can't go get it. See, we think that we could just make life a certain way and we would feel that love and that peace. But that's not how it works, because what you're looking for, is what's looking. What you're looking for is the source of your desire. In other words, you are, the infinite is calling you back home. It's inviting you to come back to yourself. And that pull is what shows up as the wound in the heart when we feel identified as a separate being. That wound in the heart that we all have. We weren't all loved perfectly when we were growing up. And so we got these wounds along the way of not experiencing unconditional love. But that doesn't mean that it went anywhere, because how could it? Because that which is infinite is everywhere in its fullness, in every moment, in time and space. Yes? So if that's true, that's the premise, then we have to keep remembering that when we're seeking happiness or we're seeking love in our life, is that we don't have to do anything out here. I mean, we can do things out here because we have the ability to work with, conditions and phenomena. We can, but it's not going to be the lasting love and peace that you and I really want. But the only thing that's lasting is when we get back to our original nature. Yes? So this is the journey. Again, it's a journey of realizing, of recognizing, of waking up to who and what we truly are. And that's the beauty of this, is because you can't fail. Now you can delay this process. This evolution of consciousness is not something that's foisted upon you, but it remains 100% available. It's egalitarian. Everyone is invited to the party. There's the kingdom of God, as Jesus said, is within you. And that means you. And that means you and you and you and me. So this is the good news. So I wanted to share also something from Barbara Marx Hubbard. You know who she is? She's a futurist, and she used to live pretty close to me, and when I was in Santa Barbara, and I had some cool conversations with her, and we actually invited her to speak in Santa Barbara. She's just an amazing, brilliant mind and heart. And she says, and this fits in with this whole idea of evolution, she says, she refers to the most evolved human today as the Homo Universalis, or the universal human. She said, we are the crossover generation moving from one phase of evolution to the next. Although barely perceptible, as were the earliest humans in the pre-human world, a young Homo Universalis is emerging everywhere, in every culture, faith, and background. The signs of our emergence as universal humans include an unconditional love for the whole of life, a powerful, irresistible passion to unite with spirit within, and a deep, heartfelt impulse to connect with others and co-create a world equal to our love and our capacities. Isn't that beautiful? And as we pass through our crises, as we successfully birth ourselves into more universal humanity, we will emerge capable of co-evolving with nature and co-creating with spirit, we will be able to co-create a new world. And this is the hope of this time. This is where I want to live. Is, we can certainly look at what's wrong and what's broken and what's not working in our world, and there's plenty of examples to go around. And the news, is rife with all of that kind of data and evidence. But don't we know that the news is really just one giant prayer request? Yes, it says calling for an enlightened perspective. It isn't just going to be a bunch of people sitting around going, "Ain't it awful?" That's going to evolve our species or allow us to see differently so that we can be differently in response to those things which are not as evolved as we are capable of. She says, during these transition times, it's important to stabilize our consciousness as universal humans. And we can do this by engaging in authentic relationship with others of similar intent in a collective field of resonance that can support our conscious evolution by staying awake together. Staying awake together. And that's really the opportunity of a spiritual community, isn't it? That we can become the resonant field in which people who come into this community, and those of us who are already here, we don't just come here for our own spiritual growth and development. We come here to be an emanation of the spirit that we are, and so that others who may be in contact with us in this community, they can pick up on the vibe that we are carrying, and by a vicarious sort of process, those feeling the energy of our own understanding can move in the direction of their own awakening, just by being in the field, just by being in the same resonant field. That's what I think a spiritual community is all about. It's not just, coming together and singing songs and having a message. It's really about creating a field of consciousness in which others can feel and know the truth of their being when they're not particularly aligned in that moment when they come in. And we can all play a part in that. We've all had days when, maybe we're a little bit higher in our understanding or our consciousness, and we're not triggered by the same thing that somebody in the room is triggered by, where they're feeling more contracted and they're feeling more separate. By us, doing our work and bringing that consciousness to this environment, we then create a field in which awakening can take place, and not just for us, but for every one of us. Yes? So I still think there's a place for spiritual community, even though we know that spiritual communities in this physical setting are starting to become less popular and less populated. But I believe that there is still an extraordinary opportunity to do as what Jesus said, when two or more are gathered in the name of the truth. There I am. In other words, there is an acceleration, there is a heightened awareness that can be palpably noticed, felt, and it can be the stimulus for your own awakening. I think that's still the advantage, because we are still human beings. In other words, we still are sensitive to the energy field of our humanness, and how we can still translate and share energy with each other through our physicality, which I'm not sure is still as powerful in a virtual environment. Maybe it is, I don't know enough about it. But something feels more real, doesn't it, to you, to be here than it would be from a virtual standpoint. And I bless those who can't be here and would like to be here, or choose not to be, that's fine. But I really still endorse the notion that us getting together as best we can, as often as we can. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up with, this is just a summary that comes from the book, and it is well said and better than anything I could say probably. So let's just close with these words, and then we'll do a little meditation. Each of us is the one dreaming that he or she is an individual personality. The purpose of life is to awaken from that dream, to know ourselves as limited human beings living in a physical universe, and simultaneously to know ourselves as unlimited and eternal. And so this is the notion that some of us get stuck like, am I a spiritual being or am I a human being? I don't know, which one am I? Sort of like, in any given moment, you could like, what am I? And it isn't an either or proposition, because somehow I think we feel like, oh no, I'm a spiritual being, and we want to sort of deny our humanity. But there's only one presence, right? One power. There's not two, so we're not two. But it is true that the one presence and the one power can take different forms. And currently, the spirit is taking form, as your body and as your mind. But it doesn't leave you separate from that oneness. It's just a temporary representation and a physical representation. The process of awakening is called evolution. We now find ourselves at a crucial juncture in human history. We have attained godlike powers, but have not developed the wisdom needed to broker these powers. Yes? Our development has become dangerously one-sided. We've achieved an astounding degree of knowledge of the material world, yet we remain appallingly ignorant of ourselves. We have failed to parallel our external development with growth in self-awareness. And I think that could be underlined, because we have sort of gone so far in the mind, in the understanding of, complexities of the mind, and we can, put people on the moon, and we can do all these very elaborate things with technology today. And so we have really developed that well. But we have sort of overlooked this more immediate study and awareness of who and what we truly are as spiritual beings. We have used awareness to become aware of objects in our world and shifting objects in our world, but we have lost connection with the purity of our own consciousness, which really is a light unto our true nature and who and what we are. And that's the opportunity. Not that we have to give up on developing the mind, but that we give equal attention to developing this intuition and the awareness of who and what we are internally as spiritual beings. The crisis before us is a spiritual crisis. The vast majority of us do not know who or what we truly are. Waking up has become an evolutionary necessity, yet something is keeping us asleep. Wouldn't you agree that the answer to what ails us in this world is a spiritual question more than anything else at its foundation? Yes? Yeah. And knowing that, doesn't that sort of lean you inward? Doesn't that give you a sense that, okay, I need to keep my attention here, because it's so easy to get lost in the external world and, the figuring how to re-landscape our lives in the world and what's wrong with those people and, what's right with those people. That's such an easy game for the mind to play. It externalizes the problem and it externalizes the answer. When all along, the problem is fundamentally how we perceive ourselves and other people that has allowed us to get to where we are. Because, if you feel oneness, if you feel a connection with others, nobody has to moralize how you should be or how you should behave, right? You already feel, if I feel, it's like the Chief Seattle quote about, what we do to the web, we do to all. We don't operate in a vacuum, because we are all connected. That alone, that understanding alone, would heal a great deal of our challenges in life. And that's an inner answer, that's an inner recognition first, and then it becomes an outer behavior. Yes? So lastly here, Rather than adapting to the natural world through biological evolution, humans have evolved a brain that gives us the ability to create internal virtual worlds. And we can change these internal maps more quickly than it takes to evolve biological changes. We have developed cultures that allow us to pass these survival strategies on to subsequent generations. When environmental conditions change, we can readily adapt. The problem is that the human mind, designed to help us survive, is no longer our servant. It has become our what? Our master. We have become identified with this mind. We think it is who we are. Thus, we are afraid to abandon it. Humans, this is the last point, humans have two very powerful internal forces pushing in opposite directions. We have the drive to maintain our existing identity and another drive to grow and to evolve and to become more than we believe ourselves to be. The conflict between these two forces is being felt more poignantly now than ever before. This is the call to survive as we have identified ourselves in limited form, and the simultaneous call to evolve consciously to know our true spiritual nature at one with all of life. Amen? Amen. I was going to have a Q&A, but I think I've used up all our time, so we'll do that next week. But let's do a little inward glance, shall we? So I just invite you to take a deep breath with me and let it out. As we free the mind and allow our attention to come into the heart space. We have ears to hear. And Jesus said, you have ears, but you don't have ears to hear if you're not listening with the intuition, with the ears of the heart. The mind can do marvelous things, but the mind cannot perceive the infinite. To perceive the infinite, we must align ourselves with that part of us that is one with the one. We call this the wisdom heart, or the spiritual heart, or the heart of us. So I invite you to breathe now into the heart. And as you breathe in, just allow your heart to expand as if there was no limits on the heart's expansion. Because truly, in the metaphysical, actual sense, there is no limits. We perceive them because we identify as a human body. But the infinite is what you are. You are an expression of this infinite life and love. There may be this temporary housing that has occupied your awareness, but there's no limits on awareness, is there? You can right now be aware of not just your own self sitting in a chair, but you can become aware of this whole room. Try it. Just allow your awareness to move out, to take in this entire space. And then to move beyond this room to this whole building and become aware of the entire building at this address and all the land that surrounds it, the gardens, parking. Now to just let that be free to expand in every direction to all of Port Angeles, that you can be aware that awareness has no limits. Consciousness has no bounds. The you, the true you, has no boundaries or barriers. You are one with the infinite being that is God, that is life, that is truth. And as you allow this awareness and this sense of being to go out in ever expanding circles, you realize that what you have taken yourself to be is a mistake, a limitation, a looking through a glass darkly, as the Apostle Paul said. But then he said, then the day will come when you will see in fullness, in wholeness. You will no longer see limits or barriers or boundaries. You will see as it is, as it really is. And you will know yourself as the infinite. You will stop squeezing that sense of self, and you allow it to expand as we have today. And you will know possibilities that you couldn't know before. And you will know a peace that passes all human understanding. And you will know what unconditional love is, because there will be no barriers or conditions placed upon this divine love. And this is what it means to be made in the image and likeness of God. So let's sit in this expanded state of knowing, of being. Let every other thought go and just feel the awareness of being itself without limits. This journey is available to us in every moment of remembering. Whenever we intend to see beyond the human limits that we take ourselves to be, there is a vast, unbridled reality waiting for us to recognize, to explore, by simply becoming aware of being aware, of consciousness being conscious of itself. Simple, nothing to do, just notice. And when we begin to see with this unbounded capacity for recognizing the infinity that is the reality that we actually live in, then we are no longer bound by those problems that we think limit us. Because the infinite cannot be limited. If it could be, it would not be infinite. And so you can't either, because you are an expression of this infinite life, love, peace, and joy that is spirit itself. This is the grand homecoming, which we have all come here to experience. We can do it in a community. We can journey alone, but it's always within reach. For this we say, thank you, God. So it is.